For most people with a technical background, it doesn't exactly feel natural to capture attention, win influence, and successfully sell an idea to a potential client or even your best friend. And yet, these soft skills are more vital than ever when it comes to leveling up your career, regardless of the field that you're in. This is how you play life's long-term, infinite game. My guest today is the Director of Sales at Complete Genomics. He rejected the classic academic track in biomedical science, acting on his other unique talents to work his way up the food chain in scientific sales and business development. And now he's here to tell us how he did it. This is the Discovery Arc podcast. I am Drew Douglin, and today let us welcome Abel Gutierrez. So what kind of came first, passion-wise, the science or the sales?
No, it's definitely was the science, and I like this question because people always think that I joined the sales force right away, but it was literally just falling in love with science early on. You know, the traditional T-Rex and looking for fossils, and then as you get into high school, the whole ER. People still reference that show, wanting to be a doctor and save lives, and then some of these research shows like CSI, and so it was definitely a science.
Yeah, I was a similar path. I really liked Scrubs, the comedy show, the medical show. And so that was like definitely driving me towards medicine. And then, why is it everyone is obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid?
Yeah, I don't know. It's maybe in our DNA. I don't know.
Yeah. So were you thinking you might be sort of a clinician, like going forward into sort of, further school?
Yeah, I some of it's the cultural upbringing too. You got to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or mixed in with what you see on TV, and so you start to look at shows like ER and what doctors do, and they glorify the pay and the excitement of it and all that. So going into the university, it was like I'm pre-med, like 99.9% of everybody going in or whatever it is. Yeah.
Oh wow! So you were on that medical track then going into undergrad.
Yes, most definitely. And I liked it. And it was, still the thought process in your head, like, I'm going to do this. You take your basic science classes, you start to volunteer. And then that's when it hits you, like when you're volunteering and you realize whether you have that persona, whether you have that in you to do the things that are required of physicians, all the way through that tenuous track that they have to go through. And then you also realize that it's not as sexy and glamorizing as ER makes it out to be, right? You're not like, seeing bullet wounds come in and ducking in the ERs and rush. It's code browns and people that are, kids trying to bite you. So I realized at that point, I may not have that phenotype for this. Yeah.
So what was the moment where you sort of veered more towards, scientific research and being in the lab?
Yeah, it was actually, I think, volunteering at the VA hospital at UCSD and seeing, that there was other physicians going upstairs to these other areas, these labs, and then, poking my head in and, seeing actual science going on. And then that kind of brought me back to some of the books I had read early on and as a child, and then talking to some of these physicians that became researchers and why they were into research. And it just kind of started appealing to me. And so I started looking more into that. And then that kind of bug kind of hit me. Yeah.
So were you thinking you might want to be, full-time scientist or professor career-wise?
Well, yeah. And that's, so that was the next, like, okay, let's, that fork in the road and you veer off and let's see what this looks like. And so you go out and, look for a lab job like anybody else, right? And, you try to start off by washing dishes and whatnot, and but quickly get into the grind and start pouring gels. And it was something that did excite me. And the more I got into it, I think it was actually one of the labs, the only lab that actually allowed me to work in their lab. It was this one that I reached out to out of a list of 30, because at the time, UCSD, that, the research field's pretty impacted as far as those, intern positions and startup entry-level positions. And this is pre-internet. So I got on the phone with the 30 labs that looked interesting from the bio department and started calling these guys saying, hey, I can't get an entry-level job because I guess you have have to have experience for a no experience job, but I'll work for free for at least 6 months and 20 some hours a week. Just want to be in the lab. And 4 labs called back. One was like, cool, like we never turn down free work, but because it's free, I'm going to pair you up with this really, really cool postdoc, and you're going to actually do some real science. And so, bam, I got paired up with Dr. Toshiisa Anzi, and he just Japanese postdoc that was very hungry for knowledge. He was a physician by training, but I got the research bug, and I learned a lot of what it was like to be a researcher and the things that mattered ethically and whatnot from this guy. He's really the one that turned me on into research. And quickly started going down that path, and one job led to the other. And yeah.
Wow. That's great that you just like put yourself out there, got on the phone, said, hey, I just want the experience of work for free.
Yeah. It, I don't know. It's kind of a lost art these days, huh? Just, picking up the phone and talking to people. But yeah, I think that's probably the foreshadow of, where I started thinking maybe, there's other things I can do with my life, but it didn't hit me till later. But yeah, it was nice to have that feedback from these PIs.
What were you working on then in those sort of early days in the lab?
Ooh, man, if I have to go back, it was a cardiology lab. So they were working on GRK and looking at lentiviral model for controlling congestive heart failure. Yeah, and so they had this pig pacing model, literally, where they induced CHF in pigs and put them on treadmills and induce this, and then look at different ways of treating it. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Because my background is cardiovascular medicine, so I didn't realize you were in that. So then, how did the sort of genomics work come along? Was that later?
Yeah, no, it was. So eventually, it then became. This is cool, but like any other lab job, the pay isn't as great, and I ended up getting married early in life, and so you have a different set of responsibilities and a little different financial responsibilities, and so then it became all right. Well, I probably have to get something that pays a little better, and applied to several other jobs, but now I have experience, right? So there's people that came calling, and Scripps was the very first one, Scripps Research Institute there in La Jolla, and I ended up getting a job in the sequencing core doing Sanger sequencing. But they also did peptide synthesis, so I got put in as a entry level technician, I guess, synthesizing peptides. But that's when I started seeing sequencing. So,
got it. So what year was that?
Oof. So it was 97. You're dating me.
Well, no, the reason I say is because, you have had a, long successful career now in the genomic space. And I was kind of looking back at the timeline, and you got the human genome just being sequenced in 2003. Yeah. So I was just kind of curious, you were in that whole milieu at the time, and, what was that environment like? And did you and your colleagues know how huge this was going to be at the time?
Yeah, no, it definitely overlapped. But, it's interesting that I did cut my teeth there in that lab and got really great experience. As a matter of fact, I did well enough that where they put me on salary before I graduated and became full-time, working at Scripps while I was an undergrad, doing work in that core under Lisa Bibbs. And she opened the doors to a lot of different labs and people early on, people like Ben Cravat and Richard Lerner, but some of the legacy people there that built up Scripps. But when she left and they kind of reorganized the core, I actually jumped out of that space and went over to do some neutrophil research with Dr. Bernie Babiar. So while that was going on, I actually moved myself out of it and started doing more immunology type work there with Sergio Katz, Dr. Sergio Katz, who's still there, and Dr. Jenny Johnson, who's still there. Yeah. So I saw it, and then it passed me by, not realizing that it was later going to come back into my life much later. But yeah, so I got to see it from the sidelines.
How did you make that field transition in the research front from sort of, sequencing to then like immunology?
It was just one of those things where it was, again, probably more financially driven, where it, as I applied to different positions, because Scripps always has a ton of different openings and different fields. And I just thought this one, based on the responsibilities, would be what would meet my financial goals first. But then I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool research. So, I guess making the case to Bernie that, hey, I can learn this stuff quick. Look, I've got a general bio background. I nailed it on peptides and understood sequencing. I can pick up immunology and whatnot. As a matter of fact, a little bit of the building up the antibody core lab was part of that. My job description right before I left the Corps. So I had a little bit of all that mixed up, and I just said I'm good enough to be dangerous. So he took a chance on me, and that's where I ended up. Yeah.
Nice. Now, you had some interesting conversations, I think, at the time with your advisors about whether you should pursue a PhD or not. And I found this very interesting. And this is not something people get such candid advice on. So what was that story?
No, yeah. As Bernie was, beginning to kind of retire too, and I was looking at other options. I was advised to try a position at GNF, which was just starting, right, the Genomics Institute of the Novartis Research Foundation, early on, and I heard that they were recruiting, really talented people to do really cool research with a ton of money to do pretty much any field that they wanted to do, as long as they had druggable targets. And as I moved into to GNF, I started working in the genomics core, functional genomics core, under Dr. Sumit Chanda, who was there at Scripps. He was at Burnham after Novartis, and now at Scripps. But and he's probably going to be upset that I'm saying this. Not upset, because I still talk to him about this advice, and he claims he doesn't remember it, but it's a cool story, I think. But yeah, as I had my first kid there at Novartis, and I was still relatively young, and thinking about going to grad school, he knew I was thinking about this. And one day he just said, hey, I understand this is where you want to go. You're doing really well picking up now functional genomics and automation. But something that we should talk about is what your life would look like if you do go and pursue the PhD program. Not to discourage me, it's like a great program. Obviously, he went through it, and it's the end all be all, right, as far as degrees. And I'm sure you probably would agree. MDs will probably disagree. And he said, yeah, so if you go down this road, and especially having the responsibilities that you have, your life will look like X, Y, and Z. However, if you really do want to, write grants and run a lab and kind of spearhead those ideas and be that kind of CEO of your lab, continue down that path. But if that's not what you want to do, and really the passion is the science and the technology and all of that, then, and based on, I think what he said at the time, he didn't really say it, but said it later, with being a social butterfly in the lab, it's probably better to go into industry, look for cool technology, hitch your wagon onto companies that are doing things that aren't in textbooks, and that will control your salary, and that would be much more marketable, and you'd have a much more lucrative career doing it this way. But also treating that as your grad school, like year one, you come in, you just learn everything. Year two, you make it your own, and you start to tweak things here and there and build your brand. But by year three, if there's nothing new and it's not the company's fault or your directors or whatever, you move on and look for the next thing, and you just keep going. And it was probably the best advice I could have gotten, because I did say, look, I don't want to be the one that writes the grants. I like the cool science. I like the inventions and the high tech and creating new assays and things like that, and being on the edge. And so if you look at my history, it does look like it's a 2 years and bounce, but it's doing a lot of cool things, like dabbling in biosensors and startup companies and drug discovery, high throughput PCR and mass spec devices that weren't on the market yet. And so I really appreciate that advice. And we come back and joke about it now. He's saying he doesn't remember it, but I don't know what my life would look like if I didn't listen to him and just went down the PhD track. Probably would have been okay, but it's just a different life.
Yeah,
I'm happy where I'm at.
That's incredible. And you've been in industry life a while now. Do you feel like that kind of attitude and direction still applies, because I feel like a lot of folks doing their PhD, they kind of figure out, oh, maybe I don't want to stay in academia, but there's almost this perception that the PhD is kind of the table stakes to get to wherever you want to go. So do you think there's still room to do that kind of that thing that you did and follow that kind of path just with
I think so. But at the same time, those that are pursuing the PhD and are going to stick it out, I think there's things that they can do to actually get the best of both worlds there. But there's some things they probably have to do early and realize that they need to do it early and really act on it in order to kind of get a similar I guess, reward as far as, experience and financial reward. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of those things that just kind of like putting yourself out there, getting involved with, different folks in industry, seeing what kind of experience you can get there? Or...
Yeah, I think, the experience you're getting, I think through the academic track is going to be unique to everybody. It's extremely powerful, extremely valuable. But socializing that and building that brand, for yourself in your community and in industry, I think is extremely important to get ahead. And I think what a lot of people don't do or realize too late is that they didn't start building their brand and networking and talking to the people that they needed to talk to get to that step 2 or 3 years later. And that has to start like day one of your PhD, because it takes sometimes a couple of years, 3 or 4 years before you get there. And being able to verbalize that and socialize and rub elbows with these people that may influence your career, it starts early. They have to see that early. And unfortunately, it's not till they finish and decide, oh, now I'm going to go out. And then it's like, well, now I've been applying for jobs for 8, 12 months and I can't get one. Well, it's because the ones that did this early, are the ones taking those jobs.
Yeah, some of the mistakes I think around networking, right? Which even that term sounds so loaded. It's like, I'm going to go to networking events because I'm a taker and I'm like actively looking for a job, as opposed to I just connecting with people way ahead of time, almost with this, outcome detachment. It's just like, I want to meet people, see what's up, as opposed to like try and gain something.
Yeah. I've seen some really, brutal, cringy methods where some people really think that, okay, if I go to this event and show up my resume and my folder and then just start, shaking hands, that I'm going to get a job. And that's not really how it works. Or I met you, I hit you up on LinkedIn, we're now, connected. Now you're going to, fast track my resume up the food chain, and unfortunately that's not how it works either. They're confusing, I think, the channels and the process of networking with the actual networking itself. I think if I can expand on that, I think what people should be looking for, looking back, and there's some really good books on the subject too. But it's meeting the people and making sure that you're staying in contact with them, whether it's at social events like the Society of Fellows that Scripps used to put on, the postdoc run vendor shows, or the 2-minute kind of pitches. I don't know if you remember those postdoc.
The lightning talks.
Yeah. And showing up each and every time, people notice if you're there, and it's like, well, I've seen this Drew guy 4 or 5 times. What's he about? And that's when those conversations start. But then it's also identifying, if you now get more granular in the networking kind of jargon, the hub and the spoke and hub model. Are you a hub where you can connect to a lot of people, or are you a spoke and just kind of a gatekeeper of your path? And in order to network well, it's meeting as many people as possible, and then identifying which ones are those hubs. And is that hub connected to where I want to go? So it's not stopping at the handshake and the one person, but going beyond, knowing, is that person going to lead me to that next hub or another spoke, and just continuing to do this month after month, year after year. And in that time, you're going to identify maybe only a handful of people. Those handful of people are actually going to really, really fast track your career. But if you don't do the work, you're not going to get to those 4 or 5 people.
Yeah. I love that metaphor, and it's so true. And there's that implicit power as well, isn't there, in being that connector and like bringing people together.
So Malcolm Gladwell has a book. Oh my God, what's it called? Uh, Tipping Point.
Tipping
And
point. Yep.
yeah, and there's also another book by Albert Laszlo Barbasi. I'm probably butchering his name, neuroscience guy, computational guy, and it's called Linked. And it talks about those power laws and the hub and the spoke model in a different way. And it is a definite. There's definitely people out there that are natural connectors, and they connect not because they're getting something out of it. It's just something like someone who's able to run a 10-second 100-meter. They just do it, and they love doing it, and they practice it. And those people, when they actually realize that they are that person, it's that power. It's like, wow, I am this. This is my superpower. And when you find one of those, they can definitely expedite your career if it's in a positive way, because it can also be negative.
Yeah, those power laws are so true, and it's like the 20% of the inputs result in 80% of the outcomes, right? The classic Pareto distribution. But you've got to get enough volume to find those key spokes, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That are then going to fast track things.
It is definitely a grind, and then when you find them, you also have to have the right fit. Like what are you also bringing to the table? It's a two-way street. It's a partnership. It's a relationship. So it's true about when you grab mentors, or whether it's a formal mentor or kind of an informal. There's something that they need to get out of that relationship just as much as you're getting out of it. And if you're not nurturing it, it's going to die, and you're going to fall off that. Your spoke is going to be clipped, and your hub's going to fall off.
Yeah, the whole bike breaks down. So offering value in advance. So did you realize that this was one of your superpowers? So how did you sort of make that transition then to sales? Like, did you sort of connect the dots here?
No. So like to some degree, you're doing something right. You just don't know what it is. And it's funny because I was thinking about the Ted Williams, big old school baseball player that used to be like one of the most consistent hitters in history. And you say, well, how do you hit so well? It's like, he's like, oh, I just follow the ball all the way through. But when they actually watched him, it's like, no, he's not doing that. So, it's one of those things where I knew I was doing something right. I just didn't know what. And, when I was in my last stint at Scripps in the Rosen lab, working for Hugh Rosen, who's one of the founders of Receptus, one of my favorite account managers, Adolfo Gonzalez, who had covered the account early at Scripps under Invitrogen, LifeTech, and also under GNF with me. We developed this friendship, right? Because you start to trust your vendors, your certain sales reps that go beyond sales, and they become your consultants, right? What's the next thing? What's going to accelerate my work here in the lab? What should I invest in? What should I latch onto? He's the one that moved up the food chain in sales and said, hey, I'm starting this team, and I think you should be in sales. I'm like, I never, ever thought I'd be in sales, ever envisioned myself being in sales. I'm like, God, I don't want to be a sales rep. People hate those guys, right? Usually. Right? Just
That's a dirty word.
Right. But he said, no, I think that, you're the one always bouncing around the different labs and asking people how they're doing and, actually pitching products that you like. So I've seen that over the years. I think you'd be good at this. And, I would say he conned me into the role, or he sold me on the role. And long story short, there he convinced me to apply, and I got my first sales job at doing inside sales for Life Technologies because of him. And, that's how that started, selling consumables in the area and the region that I like, and selling stuff that I was familiar with.
Yeah, it's amazing that you had that independent observer to give you that validation, because I think I said this to you before, but when we would kick around in San Diego at networking events, and you sort of said something sort of similar to me, and just like, oh, maybe you'd be good at sales. And I think as a researcher, you don't necessarily know what some of those strengths are, and I think you need people to point out, because like you, I was just completely mind blown. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I've never even thought that could be a possibility.
Yeah. And it's why I do it now. Somebody paid it forward, right? Like, what Sumit did for me, or what Adolfo did for me. And this is why I love to connect people online, or go to these events, or host these events, because, you can change people's careers for the better and their lives for the better. And it just takes somebody being that observer that can tell them, because they may not have had and may never have somebody tell them. So I've kind of taken on that role now. Like I'm trying to identify people that could benefit from changing their thought process to something that may benefit them that they don't realize will benefit them.
Yeah. And so what kind of sales were you in, and what sort of positions have you held? Did you say that was sequencing then at Life Technologies?
No, so it's consumables, like straight up,
Oh,
TAC and PCR reagents and media, Gibco stuff, right? All the stuff that you see, that are standard in the lab early on in Life Technologies or research in Life Technologies, Applied Biosystems, that they were kind of the premium brands at the time. And I did pretty well there, and I used that sales position to really build my brand and my business within the San Diego region. And taking that flavor of building community and creating these different community events to help bring people together, but at the same time to educate them on the products I was selling. And so I did that for many years. And part of the reason I was there probably the longest is because I had a really, really great manager named Stacy Zott, who had it not been for her, I probably would have left even earlier. But she made it fun. She made it exciting. She was really good at providing feedback, changing my approaches, and really made a huge impact in how I sell and how I sell today. And so when she retired or decided she was going to retire, I was asked to join a company called NanoString, and that's where I got into started getting into the genomics space, working for Christian Nelson, who, talking about networks, was in the lab with me with Sumit Chanda back at Novartis. And so that's how that connection was. Oh, hey, I know you from the lab. I know you from the name you're making in the area. And now there's this new company called NanoString that's got this encounter and, targeted gene panels. And it's like, sounds really cool. Why aren't people doing more of it? Because they don't know about it. And that's why we need salespeople like you. So he conned me into that role. And that's what started me down that role of genomics. Yeah.
nice. So you were mentioning there, just like showing up in the community, educating people on the product. So, what are the skills needed generally for sales? Like, what does it take to be a good salesperson, and maybe what do people get wrong, or what are the misperceptions?
Yeah, I think, the gift of gab sometimes is what people say. Oh, if you can talk a lot and, do blah, 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 then you're going to be good. It's not, it helps a lot to be able to make it easy to have a conversation with people, but it's really, having a passion to work with people and understand people, and not the product, but what is the motivation, learning how to read the room, learning what motivates that person you're talking to, and then putting that into practice where you can quickly influence somebody in that time that you're given. It's a skill set. Some people are born with it and develop it, but some people can learn it and just get really good at it too. But it takes practice. It takes a lot of handshakes, and these community events, I think that's probably where if you realize you're a people person, you love to talk to people, you like to influence people, and you truly love helping them, then that's what they should be doing, is going out to these community events and practicing that every day. Not trying to sell, just understand what motivates people being in that crowd and understanding the different personalities. That's, I think, what people that get that right will do well initially. And then as they want to do more complex sales, there's definitely some nuances that you have to start to pick up to get to that point. Now it's taking that sale, loving that person, but now loving the group that you're talking to, because you have multiple stakeholders now. The more that dollar value increases in your sale, you've now got to learn to do that in a group and make sure that you really enjoy working with that group, that you're passionate about working with that group and making it succeed, but learning the differences of what they value in that interaction, and then changing your pitch for each one of them to build that story and move it forward. So I guess long story short, yeah, they have to love people and they have to want to win. If you don't like winning and don't like competing, and yeah, it's going to be difficult to be in this environment. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. How do you generally sort of get, when someone's in this role, how do you kind of get a client's attention? Is it with having that story, and then I guess at the end as well, how do you sort of close the deal?
Right. It is that it's getting attention, right? Why does this person have to spend 2 minutes with me or 1 minute with me, or if I require more than that, why would they want to invest that with me? And it really is just the introduction and making sure that they have a positive experience with you. And it may not even happen then, but it is that, the very first step is, do they like you? And they won't know until you meet them. You meet them and start shaking hands and having a conversation. They quickly can tell whether that conversation is going to go for it. It's a lot like dating. Like, and once you get past that, do I like you? It's then, all right, well, then do I really need you? What are you pushing, or what are you selling, or what, how can I help you? But it all starts, I think the majority of the sale, the hardest part is that initial first stage, and very few people do it well these days. Probably COVID, changing technology or whatnot, that skill set's starting to die off pretty quickly. I can tell from just being out here so many years. But that's that would be the first biggest step, is getting that person to pay attention to you because you have something to add to their life. And what is that? That's the problem solving, what PhDs do well, right? But now it's taking that into a social setting and understand, like, okay, what am I trying to get out of this? What is my thesis? And how do I get started? And what is this person? What makes this person tick? And put it in a conversation.
I presume as well, you're doing a good amount of background, especially as the product or the area becomes more specialized.
Yeah. It definitely, you definitely have to bring your A game on the technical side too, right? I do like to say that a lot of times people think that technology sells itself, and our scientists are going to be objective. And in my experience, they're just as prone to marketing tactics as anybody else that's a non-scientist, right? And it's still, especially on the larger products that you sell, or the more complicated products, it's still an emotional buy. It's still an emotional decision. A lot of things that may be going through that director's head when they want to switch a platform completely over. Like, what are they going to think about me? Do I have justification here? Is there the chance that I fail? How am I going to look? All of these. So it's an emotional decision initially. When they get over that, because somebody convinced them of it, whether it's a friend's friend, or a really great salesperson, or a combination of all of it, then you go down that technical track, and that's when you have to have your A game and be able to present technically, or work with your team. That's a lot of these are, technical teams that put these deals together too. So working even internally with your team to ensure that they are on the same page with you, and they can pull off the same thing you're doing by being likable and being able to like being with the customer and whatnot to push that deal forward. But
yeah.
So,
when you're handling objections, I mean, how much is price generally an issue, or is it come more down to ease of transition or inertia?
I think it's field and product dependent, but I think in most cases everything starts with price. Everybody thinks it's price, but I think you and I know, the iPhone isn't cheap. If you really wanted to save money, there's areas you can do it. So there's value in the product. There's value in the community that product is in. So it almost always goes away from price when you start to kind of peel back the onion and find out why are you making this switch. It may be price on the surface, but it's price because somebody asked me to do this. The institute asked me to change the vision of the company. I need to reduce the employee count, or I may need to increase the employee count and scale up, and I could no longer meet my needs with what I have now. But they all say it's price, but it's all these backstories and all the things that pointed towards price that you have to uncover in that Q&A. And that's when you walk away from actual price itself and start to understand why it came to price. And then solving that problem, sometimes they end up spending more because you're actually saving them on these other areas that they didn't even consider. So, yeah.
Yeah, constantly understanding the client there. So I did want to switch gears a bit to, current affairs. So I know you've been sort of in the genomic space and sequencing for a while now. And I remember you saying something about the recent sort of, I guess, geopolitical landscape, I suppose, is the best way to
Yeah,
put it, and the
yeah,
Biosecure Act. So, what's happening right now in genomics, and how's that sort of affecting the future of progress and research?
yeah. And it's. I think in general, we're living in probably more of a litigious environment, right? You see with all the lawsuits between 10x, nanostring, yada yada. In a way, in an era where people are trying to maintain market share because macroeconomic, environment is kind of forcing people to scrape and maintain what they have. But at the same time, you have companies that will use different tactics to try to maintain their monopolies, and that's where I think in general with the Biosecure Act that was pushed forward to basically at the surface protect consumers' genomic data and whatnot from getting into the wrong hands. Um, on the surface, it sounds great, but it's actually not what it's doing, or how it's written is not what's going to happen, right? And so it's a way to stifle competition. And because it's genomics, and genomics impacts so many different areas of research, it really only benefits the current kind of monopolies that are out there. I'm personally like, hey, if this is really what it's supposed to do, then open this up to everybody, or have everybody be subjected to the same rules and the same criteria, right? Checking their instruments, making sure the cloud is secure, making sure all companies go through the same process. But when you look down at how the act is written, it's only select companies that are being exempted or being included to be removed from the U.S. market, but it's to benefit certain companies. And I'm sure we can all do the genome web and the Google and find out who these companies are. But unfortunately, what it's going to do, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to actually hurt our the consumers by increasing prices, right? Maintaining a stronghold on market share, which unfortunately won't allow for competition to adjust market prices. Drug discovery pipelines may be impacted. You're going to impact the speed of research by slowing these. If these pipelines were removed, I mean, a lot of the drug discovery pipelines rely on some of these companies that are named. And in the short term, trying to rebuild that, and the cost in rebuilding, does that justify pushing this forward? Most people say no. I think the recent poll from one of the organizations that was surveyed, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think only 18% of all of the pharma people that were interviewed actually were in agreement with this Biosecure Act. So it goes back to, we're scientists, and we believe in science, and we look at the facts, but unfortunately, this bill has not been properly vetted by the scientific community, and there's not enough voices out there speaking up on behalf of themselves and their colleagues. And I think it's going to impact people pretty badly if it does go through. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know where they're at? Like, what stage? Like, is this likely to pass in some form?
I know that it's moved up. I think it's sitting possibly with the Senate now, but I can't say either way, right? Whether it's that's the problem with politics, right? It doesn't abide by the scientific method either. So it's more of a wait and see game. But I think that's where people should be, checking out the actual facts, doing their due diligence, and voicing their opinion. Voting with their dollars, just like everything else, right? Every other boycott or protest. There's a website called fixbiosecureact.com that people can go and look at. And see what people have been saying about the bill and how it impacts them. It really spells it out there. But at the end of the day, every Coke needs its Pepsi. Every Nike needs its Adidas. We should have competition. It only helps accelerate innovation and whatnot, while also using the market forces to adjust prices to where things can be fair.
Yeah. It's so complex, right? Because you have this very sort of emotive language and case up front, but then you can have the unintended consequences down the road, especially for such a dynamic field, right? Like research, drug discovery.
Yeah.
So hard.
It's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in today, right? So I think the best thing we can do is, as scientists, as salespeople, and people in the community, is just to continue spreading the awareness and talking to people, because again, people are busy. Same tactics are used: clickbait, really outrageous headlines, and then people take that and run with it, not really actually looking at the body of what's been written, and what it's vetting whether it's really doing what it's supposed to do. And that's the environment we live in, right? Blame it on the social media and our attention span, whatever. But best thing we could do is voice our opinion within our local communities, our regional communities, and hope that everybody's doing what's right. And hopefully that momentum, yields the best result for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in terms of the progress with the technology itself and sort of the future of genomics, like where are we headed? I mean, we have this talk of, people being gene edited and this is on the horizon. What do you think about this? What's true, what isn't, and what's sort of in the near and long-term future?
Yeah, no, it's definitely in the short term. There's the cost of sequencing, right, dropping helps create different tools, right? It's no longer just sequencing for sequencing. It's how do I use and retool a sequencing platform to extract as much information from a cell or from a tissue. And I think because it's such a powerful tool and we're getting better computationally too, you can use genomics and sequencing to pull down proteins, to do RNA analysis at a single cell level or subcellular level, and eventually it's going to be the bottleneck is already data analysis, right? So I think the next leap is actually the companies that can figure out, or the institutes that can figure out how to scale up the data analysis, how to speed it up, how to make those tools more accessible to non bioinformatics or computational scientists that can do their own analysis, because that's the only way to really, I think, speed up the progress. Is that right now, more of these assays are being run using genomics and these genomics tools, but they're stalling in these departments or these small groups of bioinformatics specialists that are tasked to analyze all these projects. But there's fewer and fewer of them compared to how many assays are being run, and that's the field that probably needs more help getting up to speed. Either universities pumping more out, or creating more programs within industry or within academic institutes that can for technical people to take these courses to accelerate that. But the only way to scale up the the genomics field is to empower that back end with more experts. But how do we do that without a formal program? And some schools are doing it now, but I think it's going to be a lot of it on the analysis side. That's where innovation is going to come out. Mining all that data, being able to take all of these databases, whoever can figure out how to take the existing data that's out there in PubMed and all these silos and all these consortiums, and put that into a dashboard where I can just click on a gene and then kind of Minority Report Tom Cruise. I'm probably dating myself too in that movie. See all the different drug targets and side effects and yada yada just by pointing and clicking. But I think it's going to be less on the wet lab and more on the dry lab where innovation is going to happen. And I think we're starting to see that more with all these smaller companies popping up that are doing that analysis for fee for service or for non-bioinformatics experts, because that's I think the new wild west.
Yeah. How are you thinking about AI and all the tools there, like you as a company, and then maybe as your role and position as well? Like, how have you been potentially harnessing it or not?
Yeah. So, well, first, I think in the sales role, it's definitely changing. Because you can literally have scripts written up by ChatGPT that are almost as good as or better than something I would write in less time.
Wow.
So that alone is changing how we implement the sales model going forward with AI. But um, the ability to then take all of this data and then just ask those questions to almost predict what the outcome would be before you run an experiment. I don't know. It has the ability to really change, I guess, the amount of work that we do. And I guess if I think of a story, one of the researchers told me about a platform she was using in spatial, where she was able to generate so much data that she totally rewrote her grants and reduced her mice count from like 40 or 60 mice down to 4 or something like that, or 8, to where that she said, I have so much data now, I have to have something like a bioinformatics person or a computational bio person, or hopefully AI at some point that can make sense of all of this data. And it's not there yet, but that's the potential, right? If you can have strong enough computers and make this accessible, all the data accessible, the amount of wet work that can be diminished or minimized could be impacted dramatically. If I take her story of not going from a head count of like 8 to down to 3 and hiring 3 more bioinformatics people or comp bio people, like that one experiment, that one assay completely changed how she was writing grants and how she was hiring and how she was designing experiments. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I see with AI, and that could impact it even more so as it gets better.
Yeah, it's incredible, and something for scientists to think about as well, with possibly their career and retooling going forward.
Especially after writing the grant for about a year and then having to change it completely after you see the results.
Yeah, right? The whole process is so long, and then, gosh, by the time you finished it, like there's already like 3 more like LLM developments have come out at that time. Yeah. So when you're not selling people on cutting edge biotechnologies, what are some of your other personal interests outside of work?
It's funny because my circles are all intermixed and whatnot, but I do love to do Spartan races and big boxing fan. So I do a lot of the boxing training and whatnot, just to kind of try to keep young and keep up with some of these these young kids running around the office now. But so physically that also keeps me on the ready, right? I mean, you have to. The thing about sales is you kind of have to always be on, and it does help with being mentally prepared, mentally on, by being physically in shape. So I would actually recommend that for anybody jumping into sales. That's how you can kind of keep your batteries on, because you're always selling, to your point. But a lot of the people that I interact with are people that I work with that are now really good friends, and hanging out with them outside of the lab, but talking about non-lab stuff. Again, one of my mentors there early on was Sumit Chanda, but he's going into one of my close friends, and on top of being a mentor, and enjoying the San Diego life, right? Because we have a beautiful community here, access to lots of different things, and so now I've just been as an empty nester in Abel 2.0 life, I can go out and enjoy more of the adult stuff with some of these friendships I've cultivated over the years through Scripps and Novartis and the whole Mesa biotech community.
Yeah, I mean, it must be so nice when you can spend time with the work community, outside of work, and be friends. It must kind of help nurture those relationships even further.
Yeah. A friend of mine had recently told me that what he loves about being in San Diego and having the way that the labs are set up in this, in the UTC, La Jolla, Sereno area, everything's so close and compact that he loves nothing more than seeing 60 to 70% of his closest scientific friends at one bar in the La Jolla area, just having a good time, right? And that's something that you probably wouldn't get in other states or other hubs. So
yeah, that's true, because that's the beauty of conferences too. When you go, right, everyone's in one place, and it's so nice to have that on your doorstep. 24/7.
Exactly. We have it here, right? Couple blocks away, and you're there, and there's Dr. So-and-so and CEO so-and-so and technician so-and-so. And it's pretty cool.
But you have kids, right? Do you have one or
two?
Are they interested in science or sales?
Uh,
What's different?
these kids these days, right? Yeah. Um, well, one of them, my oldest is 20. Oh my God, I'm forgetting now. 24. He'll be, yeah, he'll be 24 this year. Joined the military, impacted by COVID. So when he was going to go to school, it was like, shut down. And so he decided to join the military to, travel and see the world. Navy. So he's in Norfolk, Virginia. But yeah, I think he had an eye towards engineering or sciences, the biological sciences beforehand. But I don't know. I think the Navy's changed a little bit of that. And my youngest is finding himself. He's 18 and just got his license, like everybody else these days that don't want to
Nice.
drive and try to delay that. I don't understand that. Um, but yeah, he's all over the place. I like literature. I like engineering. I like the biological sciences, but I also like history. Yeah, it's like go get a job, figure it out, figure out what you don't like, and then start, working down that funnel to what you do. And yeah, I think it's just how kids are today. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier as well, right? It's like trying enough things, getting enough reps in to just figure out,
yeah,
okay, this is the track I don't like. Maybe, this is a more viable option.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And actually, that's probably a good thing, to encourage people to just go out and do stuff, not overthink it, because you never know. You may stumble onto a job or a field or something that you would never have thought you'd like until you tried it. So, and I think the same goes for in the lab. If you don't like, you don't like a certain field, it's not the science. It may just be the lab or the specific pathway you're analyzing or you're studying. Just try something else and don't be afraid to jump, because there's 600, 800 other companies in the area. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to meeting all those new and interesting people along the way, right? It comes to the community, and
Exactly.
that's how you actually get exposed to what things are like in real life and see what potential opportunities are around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I will give you my final wrap-up question, bit of a tradition I like to throw at all my guests, which is if you could give your one piece of advice or wisdom in the area of work, productivity, health, growth, relationships, anything, what do you think it would be and why?
Man, this is one of those you're gonna make me pause, huh? No, I think it still 100% goes back to networking. I know we've talked about it a lot today, but I cannot emphasize that more. Um, study it, study people that are successful, and really ask those questions why they're there. But to be comfortable being uncomfortable in that environment. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And to go beyond that first degree, and to keep pushing to the second degree, third degree of relationships with your community, with the eye towards what do I want to get out of it, and really be just as process driven in that networking as you would in schooling. It has to be parallel, and very few people do this well and with the rigor needed to get to where they need to go. So when you see people that really achieve something at an early age and you really look back at how they did it, most of the time it's because they networked much, much better and much more aggressively. Obviously being prepared for the opportunities when they arose, but in almost all the cases, and again, going back to those two books I referenced, it's in there too. Those case studies are there. And you can even look at it internally with your friends. I can look at it from some of my peers, people that I graduated with bio degrees, and where I'm at versus where they're at. And the biggest difference is being ultra aggressive in your networking. And you don't have to be an extrovert to do it. You could be an introvert. You just have to be process driven there. And for those really, really big introverts, it's finding the right hub and latching onto that hub and going along for the ride. And you'll go far doing it that way too. So networking, 100%.
Yeah, I love it. It's definitely one of those like foundational keystones and not just a nice to have.
Yeah.
Well, Abel, I really appreciate your insights, and also coming back to the networking, just really grateful that you are in my network and you sort of opened my eyes to the alternatives back in the day when I was in the lab. So really appreciate you giving me your thoughts at the time and thoughts now. So thank you.
Yeah, no, well, open to collaborate in the future too. I think you've I think you've become a little bit of a catalyst recently of like, Drew opened some thoughts in my head again that I put away for a while. So, but yeah,
Yeah, you're gonna start your own sales masterclass, right?
maybe, but yeah, happy to discuss some of this offline. But yeah, no, I appreciate you too. It's been awesome meeting the people that I've met over the years. You being one of them as well. It's just good people, hang around good people, and I'm glad to have been in your circle too. So.
Yeah, perfect. Where should people go if they want to learn more, connect with you? I know you're on LinkedIn or other places.
So, yeah, no, I've never turned down anybody online. As a matter of fact, anybody that has that reaches out, I've rarely, I don't think I've rarely missed people as long as they're not like creepy. But for the same reason, if I'm trying to pay it forward, if they've done that first step, I'm always going to take 2 or 3 more or 10 more steps towards them to help them out. But it's got to be the right message too. So LinkedIn, I do have a Twitter handle out there, but LinkedIn is probably the best way. I check it pretty aggressively and regularly. So.
All right, perfect. Abel, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Drew.